Well, excited to have you guys on. Let's start with this, like just a quick intro, I guess, for everybody who might be watching this at a later time. We'll kick this off from the Noble side. So my name is Rahul. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Noble. And then why don't we go Josh, and then we can go Kevin and then Sage on your side.
Josh, I'm the Rahul's co-founder and CTO of Noble. We're focused on the product and engineering side of things.
And I'm Kevin. I lead the marketing team at Scrunch. I'm both a Scrunch user. We dog food our own product, and then also a user of Noble by proxy of Scrunch. So yeah, I can speak to both platforms here.
I'm Sage. I'm a principal product manager at Scrunch and have been working closely with the Noble team to get everything integrated and try to think of other ways that we can make this as easy as possible for both our customers.
Love it. So to kick things off, I think when companies or brands or SEO agencies they start thinking about AI search, their first question is just like, where do you begin? How do you even measure how well the brand is doing as a starting point? So I guess the first question is, and let's start with Sage. Like when it comes to a brand just thinking about AI search and showing up, like where do you even begin with measurement in trying to get a baseline for how well your company or team is performing today?
Yeah, really good question. And I think the main thing to think about is like what you're trying to solve for. I think a common mistake that folks often make when they're thinking about observability is they'll show up to it saying, just sort of, hey, I kind of want to know what's going on in general, or I want to market in general. Having a prescriptive marketing strategy and then tying observability to that existing marketing strategy is really the best way to get going. For example, I'm trying to sell to a specific type of person. I'm trying to sell this new product that I just launched. Um, and then using that as kind of your anchor to use the panel data and then also write sort of custom prompts based on all the data we have as well that we can help you generate to start monitoring all of these AI platforms on sort of like a daily or weekly basis, just to get a sense for what they're saying about you today, what they're saying about your competitors, and then arguably most importantly, like where they're getting the information that is leading to the things that they are saying about you and your industry. So that's kind of the elevator pitch, I think, for getting started with an
Yeah,
observability tool.
yeah, and then just to add on to that too, we see the most successful implementations or results come from thinking through things from the get-go. And by things, I mean kind of stuff like Sage was saying, like, okay, who's your target persona? Who are your competitors? How do you position your product? What regions are you in? All of this stuff of like laying the infrastructure for how you want to measure things, like really, really makes a big difference, both in paying off tech debt in the long run, because in the long run, you'll be like, oh, I need to change this and this and this. And so thinking through it up front is a really good way to make sure that you're like, this is going to be a scalable thing that you can perform and measure over time. And then once you have that infrastructure in place, then it's kind of like getting started with like a smaller bit of, here are the prompts we want to track because of this objective and around this set of topics, or just singular topic, understanding how things are measured, because it's very different than SEO world. And then start layering on top of that versus just trying to do everything all at once. And then you kind of just get in this distracted kind of, shiny object syndrome of like, I'm going to tackle this prompt. I'm going to like tackle this place. And it's just like that focus and like setting all the dimensions and context to like understand where you want to focus is like really critical for making the being successful from the get-go.
Yeah, cool. That makes sense. And I think one question I get, and obviously you guys are the experts here, is when it comes to like figuring out, well, what are those prompts they should be tracking? I feel like people have a general sense based off of like, okay, well, we have these product lines, we feel like people are asking these types of questions. They may have some like keyword volume, but if you're a brand or an SEO agency, like how do you even know which prompts to track or like what specific like language or copy you should be tracking if you know general topics, but like how do you go from general topics to being like, hey, we should actually have like these 30, 40, 50 prompts being tracked?
Yeah, I think that the cheat code for that is actually just asking AI for help of like, here's the surface area where people are talking about a product, whether that's Reddit, review sites, things like that. And then trying to get like a sense of like the zeitgeist of what people are talking about is a helpful first starting point. The other first starting point that I would say is, it depends on where you are in the life cycle of your company, but if you're like a more established company, you probably have a pretty large organic and search footprint already. And like typically we find that that's like a pretty good starting point because like, oh, these are the keywords, these are the topics that you care about. The thing that's different is, with an LLM, people do not like type a prompt in the same way that they would type in a keyword, and then also the results are more are not as deterministic as they are with like Google's 10 blue links, even though the 10 blue links are changing and personalized and they're not exactly deterministic. But AI, the probabilistic nature of AI makes it so that you want to track prompts in a way that's more like natural language and like kind of convert that set of keywords into what people would actually put into an LLM. And sometimes they're speaking into an LLM, sometimes they're typing, sometimes they're I don't know what other factors like someone would get a prompt in there, but like it is very different than like the user behavior from traditional search. And because of that, the prompt, what you track and the way you track it and the measurement of it, it becomes very different as well.
That makes sense. And when it comes to like, okay, so you have these prompts, you know what you're tracking. When then it comes time to like, okay, well, how do you start like actioning on this? So for your Scrunch customer today, obviously you guys are phenomenal at figuring out like what was the visibility, like how often you guys showing up, kind of the tracking, the monitoring. When it comes to that next step around like, well, what's the action layer? What do you recommend your clients start with? And yeah, I guess why don't you go first, Sage, and then we'll go to Kevin, and then Josh. Curious to get your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, so I'll give a very unsatisfying answer, which is it depends, but it doesn't depend that much. I think the first decision you have to make is like what metric you care about the most. Do you care about showing up in the answer the most, or do you care that people or bots are going to land on your content versus someone else's content the most? And this might differ by use case. For example, if I'm a movie studio, I don't have a huge online presence. I don't care as much as you end up on my site. I might want you to end up on a movie theater site or some other ticketing site. So what I need is to make sure that I'm in the answer. But I care more about presence in that case and less about citations versus maybe a retailer or a B2B SaaS company who really wants like conversion numbers, right? Which requires citations. Because if you don't have a citation, some people aren't going to end up on your site at all. And so pick a metric, I would say, to anchor on is like my first suggestion. And when you have that metric, I would break down the opportunity for action into two buckets: branded content and third-party content. Branded content is like everything you own, right? Your website, your LinkedIn page, your Substack, and any content that you have control over that you can influence to increase citations to that page. That is in some cases, arguably small piece of the puzzle. And you also have to focus then on third-party content, which is like news outlets, competitors, forums, everything else that you don't own. And you really have to tackle those strategies together in order to see meaningful results. If you just do one or the other, it's really not going to work that well, or definitely nearly not as well if you're doing both. Have a strategy for both that is combined. Yeah.
The only thing I would add to that really is there's kind of like a maturity curve of different precursors to what you need in order to like get to that insights layer, or even like the action layer, which is everything kind of starts with visibility. You need to understand like what's going on, what's being cited, how your brand's showing up, all that stuff, and then that gives you the kind of like what's my objective metric of where do I want to move the needle, and then from there it's like, okay, I can look at is my brand showing up or not? Are there a bunch of third-party citations showing up or not? And then that kind of dictates your strategy too, where it's like, okay, we don't think we're gonna the insights that we're finding is like we don't think our brand content, if we're going to create more content, is going to help out here, because like there's a bunch of authoritative third-party sites that are showing up here, and so therefore we need to adjust our strategy or make our strategy to go after citation and mention acquisition, because that's where we're going to see the results. And so like measurement starts first, and then you can kind of like get to the insights, and then the next part of the maturity curve is like, okay, how do we take action? And that's also kind of where Noble comes in as well.
Cool. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Do you guys, from the data you guys are collecting, can you guys tell like what percentage of people actually click on a citation from like Google's AI overview or AI mode or ChatGPT? Because it makes sense that people would want to show up in the answer, but unless we have a good sense of how often people are clicking on the links, then the citation itself like doesn't seem that relevant.
Yeah, so it's an extrapolation for sure. But what we do have for many of the models is we can see the retrieval agents coming in, which these are agents that are sent specifically to respond to a question, right? Hey, I asked a question, ChatGPT is going to send an agent, I'm going to see it hit my site. And then we have the number of people that clicked that link and ended up on the actual web page as an AI referral. Again, it's an extrapolation, but if you smush those two numbers together, you can get an idea of what the click-through rate is. It varies a lot by industry. So I don't want to get into like too much of the specific numbers, but what we do know and what's like becoming pretty common knowledge is that when someone does click that link, they're on average like 4 to 5 times as likely to convert than if they come through kind of like the Google link tree. And so it's a very valuable customer if you can get them to click the link.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It definitely makes sense. I mean, and this might also replace that click in the future is like, do you think that the LLMs will have something more clickable in the answer itself versus just the links themselves? Like, do you think the LLMs will actually want to make the answers they're giving more interactive versus just, yeah.
You can imagine a world where there's just not even a website visit at all, where it's just completely zero click. Someone's working with an agent or within the LLM, they get the answer they need, they get the product recommendation they need, and it's all transactional through the LLM itself. And in that world, you definitely want to question like, what's your website for? And like that's something that we are building for at Scrunch, which is like in that world, the agent is actually the primary visitor who's like doing all that research and working with protocols that your site is enabling to make that transaction happen. And so we're kind of building for this world where the agents are one of our primary visitors and creating an experience for those agents. And so like definitely we see that not even just clicks or like surfacing the right kind of like link to click through. Right now it's like that tiny pill that like not a lot of people see or click. But in the future, it could be just like, hey, like chatting, hey, yes, buy this for me, and it just does it. And like we're building a platform to help enable that in that's like the vision for the future.
And I actually I was saying this for a while, but I actually think there's going to be like how the iframe made it so that you don't have to visit two sites, you can visit one and get the benefit of both. I think there's going to be some combination of MCP plus iframe integration that just takes over the internet and makes web pages effectively like the actual landing page kind of pointless. I know we just redesigned our website, but hopefully that lasts us for a bit longer. But I really do think there's going to be a new widget or integration form factor that comes out to do exactly that.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you play it out, there's some things obviously that like a browser agent can do that a person can't do, right? It can do multiple things at once and it can call an API directly and like obviously consume our information. I think those are like two pretty good clues about what they are going to want to be doing when they get to your site. And then, I have this kind of maybe naive optimistic view that like that means that if and when a person does end up on your site, that they're like super high intent and they're really interested in what you're doing and you can actually give them like a hyper human version of the page and you don't need Google optimization there, you don't need AI optimization there. It's going to be like hopefully a really fun human first experience when people do end up there because it's going to happen a lot less. And so I think like that could be an interesting outcome here as well.
Yeah. Do you guys think when it comes to the actual like action that in the world of commerce that like people take, like, do you think people will be booking a demo and purchasing directly from the LLM? Or do you think brands are going to do everything they can to hold that transaction, like, especially in B2B? on their own website, like where do you expect or where would you predict that action occurring?
I think with commerce, they're already kind of like trained on it through Amazon. It's like, you have a product, you have a website, but you're already working through third-party vendors, and like they're happy to send an XML file to Amazon and like have their product all listed and just drop ship. And so I feel like that's a pretty similar behavior to how at least e-commerce will feel about AI and LLMs. It's just like, hey, if you're gonna give me more business and all I have to do is like, share these protocols or this structure with you, and you're gonna give me, like, people are gonna check out, and it's just magically gonna like show up on my bottom line. Like, great. I don't think there's gonna be any issue there. I kind of suspect the same thing on like booking a demo or other types of actions, booking a reservation, all that kind of stuff. Like, it probably will just be handled by the LLMs, I would imagine, but I don't know if anyone else has a different take.
I
I
certainly
think
agree with that. I think the harder part for B2B is like because it's not like a purchase, it's more of like a book a demo, which is like more of just like a booking a call or a meeting. I feel like there'll be agents that are designed to do that. And there are so many companies today that help like a vendor optimize their book a demo on their website. I think those vendors are just going to move more like up funnel to the LLM and then create some sort of agent that the brand can use to route the lead to the right salesperson so they book on the right calendar. Like all the infrastructure is already being built. It's just we're going to change the layer that the consumer interacts with it. But that would be my prediction. And I think it's going to happen a lot quicker than people realize. I think it'll happen like by this time next year. And that's actually where I think this market is really going to accelerate is when brands can actually start booking demos, especially in B2B from the LLM. Then this is not going to just be like a nice to have. It's going to be like a wow, we're missing out because we're making people take another step to our website when there might be another brand that could like convert them even before they get to the website.
I have this prediction kind of that it's going to get easier before it gets better. And what I mean by that is like you're going to be able to very easily buy something or book something, and it's going to feel very, very easy, but it might not be actually as accurate or durable as it will be, a year from now. And this kind of happened with marketplaces as well, where what happens is like the post-purchase or post-booking stats like implode. You get like a ton of refunds, your support tickets like go way, way up. You have a lot of people not showing up to calls, because it's so easy to do this stuff. But they're not kind of like qualified, or maybe the information on your website is not accurate to the LLM. So it thinks it's doing one thing, but it's actually doing another thing. So I think there'll be some learnings here. I think we'll get there, but I think there will be some learnings here where you end up with customers that end up with things that they don't actually need. And the post-purchase flow is going to be a lot noisier than it is right now.
Yeah, sometimes that friction is a good thing. Where a
Yeah.
good example of that is LinkedIn, or actually Facebook also, or Meta also does this too, where you can just do a form fill or LinkedIn form fill, and that's like, I'm booking a demo. But if you look at the conversion rate, because it was so easy, all they had to do was click a button. Like, a lot of times the follow through is not as strong because the intent level is not there. Whereas like if you force them to go to a demo and fill out the painstaking form, the conversion rate is actually higher there because they have more skin in the game. And so I'd imagine that, like, to Sage's point, like that would probably play out well. If it's like too easy to book something or to do something, then it'll leave a bad taste in like both sides of the marketplace's mouth. Because it like doesn't convert, or the person doesn't get like what they actually intended.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. I know we looked at even just like no-show rates for B2B demos, like when we had a previous version of Noble, and I think there was like a 30% no-show rate on average for book demos, and like that just blew my mind because I figured like maybe a 5%, but the no-show rate was much, much higher. And we were getting these stats from like the companies actually doing the scheduling or the booking on behalf of the vendors. I guess one question is like when it comes to taking actions, even today from Google search, like when you guys search for a restaurant and you could like book a reservation directly from the Google search, like they have that side panel. Do you guys use that, or do you guys go to the restaurant's website and then use like OpenTable or like Resi from that website?
I usually go through Resi or OpenTable, but I also don't I don't know if I've searched for through Google. This is like a complete like personalized thing. I always I always look at like the infatuation or eater site and then go direct from there. And so maybe that's like a different way of searching than other people do. Like I probably would book from Google if I use Google, but for finding restaurants, but I don't.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I use it all the time. So, and I normally just click the preferred option where it's like, hey, the restaurant like prefers this one, or the at like aggregator of aggregators option, which is like, hey, I know I wanted it this time, like which booking platform like can give me a reservation at that time, and I'll click the direct restaurant one or the Google one or the open table one. Like I don't really care, I guess, is like the honest
Interesting.
answer. But the chatbots are in a similar position where they're also aggregating aggregators. So it'll be interesting to see companies that want to like lean in to
Mhm.
that and companies that are leaning out of it.
Mhm.
Um, I don't think it's an accident that like Amazon was one of the first companies to build a ChatGPT app. I don't think it's, they are an innovative company. I don't think it's because they're like the most innovative company in the world. I think it's like if you play this out, the world is now a marketplace when
Yeah.
you can do multi-threaded stuff like this, similar to what Google did for the restaurant reservation aggregators, right? Um, and so the existing aggregators are trying to
Yeah.
kind of hedge their bets there, but it's a little bit of a similar situation, in my opinion.
Mm.
I thought it was really telling, like you mentioned Amazon, that I think they were one of the first to block the crawlers, and like so much of the revenue comes from ads. And so if you're relying on people clicking over to your site, searching, seeing the ads, and then clicking on that option, and that revenue is no longer there because the LLM ignores ads, or like it doesn't have that same, impact that it would have on a human. Um, I think a lot of those ads businesses will struggle if people are going straight from, the LLM and then making that transaction at that layer versus clicking in. But that probably also just means the ads on the LLM will be that much more effective if it's easy to click there.
For sure. I mean, I think also Amazon knows better than anyone that you start your marketplace fee at 4%, you build a marketplace and then you jack it up to 30%. So,
Yeah.
they were the aggressor in the past. And I think like the chatbots, like the big ones, they have an opportunity to like pull the wool again here. So I'm sure they're hyper fix like the Amazons and Walmarts of the world, I'm sure are like hyper fixated on that.
Yeah, totally. Awesome. Well, this has been helpful in terms of talking about like tactics that do work. We kind of live in this AEO world where like we're always talking and hearing different ideas. What have you guys heard that just like really is a myth that like people think this is gonna work, but in reality there's no proof of that, or you're just highly skeptical that any of these tactics that people are trying to promote on LinkedIn, probably because it's tied to buying up their product. Curious what you guys have heard in terms of the myths. We don't have to talk about the companies like hawking those, but yeah, curious like what you guys have heard around like what probably doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything's a myth right now. Like the LLMs like haven't ever substantiated. Well, I guess maybe not, but there's some things that maybe they've said like, okay, yeah, this is like how the algorithm works, but they're playing it very close to the vest right now. And I think like my take is, yeah, everything could work or might work. Like some of the things you hear are make your content chunkable, include authorship,
Mhm.
make sure you include update your content on a regular basis, and recency is definitely a thing. And make your metadata sound or written like it's a prompt, like stuff like that. You hear a lot. And I would say, like, don't trust me or Sage or any experts out there when it comes to that stuff. It's really like what you want to do is create a controlled environment and like test it for yourself to see like what is moving the needle or not. Like that's the only way to verify it right now, because there's no definitive source of truth that's saying like, oh, this is what works or what doesn't work. I think it's a lot of it's anecdotal, and there are some like more rigorous studies out there. And I think that to me, if I'm hearing that type of stuff, I'm not going to take someone's word for it. I'm more just going to use it as a hypothesis of like this is an experiment that I want to run.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes. Oh, go ahead, Sage.
I was gonna say, I think there are like a couple of things that come to mind that again, I like to Kevin's point, like I'm not gonna flat out say they don't work, but I will say I haven't seen much evidence that they are for sure working, and they're like pretty popular um positions right now, so I just want to maybe talk about them for a second. So the first one is like LLMs.txt. I've never actually seen this work. I mean, we've tried it. I've had customers that try it. Maybe it will work one day. Maybe it works in a way that I don't understand. But
Yeah.
everyone's talking about it. From what I can see, there's just no logical reason why a chatbot would need that asset. If your site is especially if your site is like HTML or Markdown fetchable, right? Like it's just not something, if you understand like how these agents are going about your site, that they would give them much value. And so that's why I'm kind of this opinion still until I see otherwise. Um, Another one is like Markdown versus HTML. I think everything I've seen so far is that it's kind of a wash. Like I think you should just pick one and do it. It's going to be better no matter what than like your JavaScript React heavy version. I wouldn't sweat the details on that. We prefer HTML on our end. I think that's like just based in the philosophy that was like the language that the internet was designed to consume, and that these models were trained on. But there is no strong evidence that one is better than the other. So like I wouldn't stress that too much. And then the last one is Reddit. We have done some research on this actually, and I think like there is something, we called it like the Reddit paradox. There's like a technical data sciencey term that if our data science was here, he would tell you exactly what it is. But it's basically this phenomenon where if you look at the aggregate, it looks like something has an outsized impact everywhere. But if you drill into, in this example, like individual industry verticals, it is very, very prominent in some and like not prominent at all in others. But the aggregate statistics make it look important everywhere. And so this is just sort of like a cautionary tale that like we are all learning here. Reddit can be very important, but you need to be looking at your own data. You need to be seeing exactly what's going on because these generalizations are generally not holding up. Sorry, I talked a lot, but I got fired up.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, in which categories do you feel like Reddit is having an impact? Is it mostly like consumer, like commercial prompts? Is it more of just like informational prompts? Like where are you seeing Reddit being like actually effective?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm just going to pull up
Pulling
this
up the
study.
infographic, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to pull up the infographic. I don't know, Kevin, if you have it up, if you want to
Oh
speak
yeah, I
to
have
it.
it up. I have it up here. We can just look at my screen
Yeah.
here. Yeah, so anywhere where there is let me if I believe Reddit citations here by industry and platform. So I think the redder or the darker it is, the more prominent Reddit is across these different LLM models. And so media and entertainment seems to be like a hotspot. Pets and animals seem to be a hotspot, but then some of these other ones you know aren't as prominent of a influence of Reddit's citation share. So that's what this is measuring here. So 5% citation share is essentially saying like of all the prompts that we're like looking at in media and entertainment, Reddit gets 5% of the citation share. That means even like, and that's like the most dense citation share. And so that means there's 95% of other citations that are not Reddit. And so that could mean, a higher intent set of prompts or a topic that you care about. If you start looking at your prompts and measuring prompts and those different types of cohorts, Reddit might not even show up there at all. And oftentimes, what we see when that's the case is more like niche sites with authority show up over Reddit, and Reddit tends to be more top of funnel. So, yeah, this is a really interesting study that shows Reddit's not the end all be all. Yeah, in aggregate, to Sage's point, it shows up a lot, but there's so many other different uh, touch points and citations that LLMs are referencing that you kind of need to like one measure it to see like what is actually going to give you what is the authoritative source, but then two, you need to have like a multi touch like strategy because like you can't just focus on one channel or one citation.
Yeah.
Unless you don't care about showing up in LLMs, which everyone like the whole point of this is doing that. So
No, this is great. This is also research because like I feel like I've seen there's this graph of like what are the top 10 brands or top 10 like URLs that show up in the citations, and they're only looking at like the top 10, but then that alone comprises only like 8% of the citations. And so it's like we're ignoring the 90+% that's out there because nobody has heard of these sources because they're mostly long tail
Mhm.
sources. So I think this is just kind of more proving or more kind of research that shows like yes, Reddit, Wikipedia, Quora, they get a lot of attention, but it's really everything else that like greatly outweighs like the 5 to 10% of citations that these like more household names drive.
Also, where there's less competition too, because everyone's going after Reddit, and then there's this other greenfield opportunity with other third-party citations, and you can get a competitive advantage there.
Yeah, cool, awesome. Josh, I know I've been kind of ignoring you, not like a bias against you,
Well,
but
I was dealing with a garage situation, not a situation. I'm moving, so I've had contractors all day, but actually managing it, luckily, okay. Today, this was the worst abuse of leaving a call. But anyway,
yeah.
Did you
go ahead,
find
Raul.
how did you find the contractor? Did you ask
We
a
had
chatbot?
oh yeah, no, our inspector told us, but good question. Good question.
Yeah. I'll say when I was moving from Kansas City to San Francisco, like the first thing I did is I opened up a chatbot and I was like, I need a moving service. Like, what should I be analyzing? And I think that's the first time I realized, like, oh man, like my buying behaviors have really changed because I think normally I would text a friend and I'd be like, hey, like, what should I use? But I didn't want to reach out to anybody because I didn't know anybody who had moved cross country recently, specifically from Kansas City. Um, so yeah, I also realized the last time I've clicked into a link on the Google now, if I don't get the answer in the AI overview or ChatGPT, I'd probably just kind of give up at that point. So, anyways, Josh, one thing I was getting Kevin and Sage's opinion on is like when it comes to tactics that like obviously there are tactics that we're monitoring in terms of like what works, but what are myths out there that you keep hearing on LinkedIn and people talking about where you just have high skepticism that those types of tactics actually work?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. Um, I think one, I mean, this is near and dear to us, but I think one that is definitely a myth is that you can just do standard link building to get mentioned in answers. Link building there is not going away in terms of its importance in traditional search. And I don't know that anybody has been able to link the contribution other than just building domain authority and building your site's profile, which obviously helps with AI search results. But when it comes to actually directly targeting visibility, I don't think link building helps. Like a lot of link building is finding something contextual and just adding a link there. And since LLMs are language models, they care a lot less about whether something is linked and a lot more about the actual context and how informative the content is. So I think the big one is that you can just perform standard link building, and that this is all just basically how link building was. I think the common threads are the fact that it's outreach based and you have to collaborate. That's the common thread between the two. But I think it's a straight up myth that you can just have standard link building done with, spam adjacent links, which helped which kind of can help as long as the DR is there, and rely on that to build presence in LLMs. I think that is probably the biggest myth that's close to our side of the world.
Totally. Yeah, that's a great one. Cool. One way that I know that when I'm in conversations with brands trying to figure out like where to invest for AEO is they think about things from like a buyer funnel perspective. So like if you're top of funnel, just trying to understand like what are the categories, what's the problem. If you're mid funnel, trying to understand like, well, what are the products out there, and then bottom of funnel, like really trying to evaluate and do research on specific brands to make a final decision. When it comes to like the tactics associated with where the buyer is in the funnel, like how do you guys look at that from like that perspective?
Um, like we kind of like the way we have it in our product is kind of following like a one of the like frameworks for the different parts of the buyer journey, where it's like I actually forget what the naming convention is, but it's like awareness, evaluation, consideration, and like
Mhm.
we use an LLM actually to infer the intent level based on the prompt. Whereas like, awareness prompt would be like, tell me about this thing, whereas an evaluation prompt might be like, compare this product versus this product. And
Yeah.
so we kind of like group those together for our customers or for anyone who's using our product. you can certainly like adjust and modify those as needed, but we try to make it as easy as possible. And the reason why we do that is because most brands are, but people have different objectives, like but a lot of times the first starting point is like let's start at the most bottom point of the funnel, because that's where if we optimize for, we'll get immediate results. And so like let's pinpoint that area and then work our way up the funnel. Some brands have a good sense of that already, and they're just like, oh, I want to actually increase top of funnel awareness because like we want to grow our piece of the pie like as fast as possible or whatever. But for the most part, like I guess the point is like people want to concentrate on different parts of the funnel. Usually they start at the bottom when they're starting. But it's important to have that in there because there's different levels of prompt and prompt intent, and you want to make sure that you're showing up for the prompt intent where it's going to be the best benefit for your business at the time.
One that I think too is like emerging here that's like extra important in the funnel is like advice, which is like not really in the buyer funnel per se, but it is like a very, very popular use, obviously, of a chatbot. And so you get into these situations where if I'm a movie studio, I don't necessarily just want to show up if people are asking about movies, right? I might want to show up if people are trying to figure out what to do if it's going to rain that weekend, or their grandma's in town or whatever, right? And so you have to start thinking about, okay, what are the situations that my consumers are in where I would want them to think of me? And a lot of that is when they're asking for advice about something, right? Versus just trying to solve like or trying to specifically find a solution in your space.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess I didn't think about that, but that, I mean, it just goes back to like what could be the relevant prompts where you would want to show up, but it's not necessarily just prompts directed to like your product and like how you think most people like find you. That's really interesting to think about it that way. Josh, I guess from your perspective, if you're the buyer, do you like when we're trying to align the buyer journey with like what tactics they should be using? I guess what are your thoughts on like where you would optimize for or you would focus if you were a marketer?
Yeah. Um, and as it and the question you mean as it specifically relates to LLMs and capturing them in the buyer journey? Yeah, I mean, I I think that I would I would love to see research on this. I'm curious about how it works to optimize for prompts of two n plus one beyond one, like how things go beyond the first prompt. I don't know. And I'll turn this over to you, Sage, and Kevin after. There's a ton of research on like what the volume of the first prompt is. I'm very curious to know, and I know there's a company. This is not a sponsored plug. There's a company that's based. I think they're based in Israel called AISO. You guys might have heard of them. They basically created a white labeled version of ChatGPT, and people pay them less, but they agree to basically store all the prompts. So they might have some of that conversation data. I'm very curious to see what those follow-ups look like after the first one, especially when it comes to a buying conversation. Like I know when I'm writing software and it gives me, an LLM gives me a bad answer, I get pissed at it. But for a buyer, in a buyer journey, it might look pretty different. And so, I think I again, I don't know if you guys have data on it. I'll turn it over to you, or if you have plans there. But I'm very curious to know what the conversation looks like past prompt one. And I think if people can start to collect that data or kind of figure out what that looks like, that would be super interesting to me.
Yeah, I think we have some indication from the panel data. Obviously, it's a panel, so grain of salt. We haven't spent probably sufficient time like extracting the aspects of like specific conversations in the panel to really have like a strong opinion about like how these conversations are um, progressing in the wild. I think that is why we anchor our platform around the funnel, is because you can imagine that someone moves from maybe awareness to advice to evaluation to comparison is kind of like the mental model that we have. And as you move down the funnel from like awareness to comparison, the tilt between third party content and branding content starts to shift. If you're third party content, if you're a PR strategy, if you're, if you are not today going out and trying to get mentioned in sources that you were not thinking about a year ago, you are not going to have a successful awareness strategy in AI, right? If people are looking specifically for you, you might have a very good evaluation and comparison strategy if your own website looks very good. But getting found is going to be difficult. So I think thinking about also which sources matter more or less as you go down the funnel is like an important consideration. But yeah, I would be interested in that data as well. I think maybe we'll go look at that. We should have it. We just need to kind of like deploy data science to go heads down.
Cool. And then one question I have, right? We were talking about results earlier. So if you're a brand or an SEO agency looking to deliver like value to your clients, what do you like? What should they be looking at? Is it visibility as the goal? Is it like traffic to the website? Is it actually like the conversion? Is it demos booked or checkouts? Like when you guys are advising your customers to be like, hey, like AEO matters or these LLMs matter because of this metric in a world where overall like website traffic is decreasing and the idea of just measuring, okay, website traffic and then like website conversions, that model seems to be breaking. What is the right metric to look at if you're a marketer or like an SEO agency?
Yeah, I can kind of speak to my own journey a little bit here in its space, which is, I mean, and this is going back to January 2025, and that's more when like the retrieval type of bots started coming more online. Retrieval being like I search for something in ChatGPT, it goes to a website and then returns an answer back to a user. Um, and then also like them including citations, like with the little gray pills. But that's when I started to notice, and I was not at Scrunch at this time, started to notice referral traffic from LLMs coming in. And then I was like, okay, if we're getting referral traffic from LLMs, like how do I influence that? Like what's happening with that user journey? And then there's just like blank space. Like there's no like visibility there. You can't use Google Analytics to, or whatever analytics tool you're using to go beyond that, if you don't have a tool like Scrunch. And so that's what got me curious about the space. And I just know that that's the tip of the iceberg. It's like that's the last mile thing. And so the things leading up to that tend to be, are you showing up in a prompt result? Are you getting citations? Because if you get a citation, that influences that prompt result. Are you getting mentioned in places where there's third party citations? Like these are all the precursor metrics that get your brand mentioned and recommended on the LLMs. And so that's where I think, there's not like, if there was one metric that mattered, it'd probably just be like, is my brand being mentioned or not? And am I showing up ahead of or ahead of competitors for this set of prompts that we're tracking? Then there's a bunch of other factors that go into that, like are you being cited, are you being mentioned, all this other kind of stuff. And so I think that's like the key metric, I would say, if I was to pick one. But it's kind of like looking at the whole equation of, is my brand being mentioned, and then are people following through and purchasing or doing some action that I want on the other end? And all the whole funnel kind of like factors into like where you would focus. And the beauty of that with Scrunch is that you can kind of like see that starting point and then like trace it back to that end point. Whereas a year ago, most marketers were just like starting with the end point of like, oh, we're getting referral traffic from LLMs. That's great. But then like, what do you do about it?
Cool. That makes sense. Sage, anything to add to that?
No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, there's a unique opportunity now to have like your consumer pay for ChatGPT tokens to buy something from you, which I think is just like an interesting position to be in as a company, where before like you were maybe spending a lot of money also on like a bunch of interactions and server space and other types of things that you needed to do to win that consumer over. That arguably now is marketing money, right? Because you need to do this stuff to get the chatbot to do that for you. And so I think that's exactly right. I think we're getting into the part of the story this year where people are going to start tying this to like real dollars. I think last year it was like please, let's just stop the bleeding. I need to know what's going on, and I need to make sure I'm not about to lose half my customers. I think this year it's going to be like, okay, let's like let's turn the ship and let's start not just trying to like break even here and start actually like turning this into a revenue accelerator for
Yeah.
us.
Do you think for that, and I agree, like that question of like going from visibility to like, okay, good to know like where we're showing in terms of visibility and like we're showing up more, but then what are the dollars collected as a result of these efforts? Do you think the attribution is there from the LLM? Because I think that's one of the biggest things that's missing is being able to show up, increase that visibility, measure that increase in visibility, but then making it easy for that buyer to then take the next step. And we were talking earlier about like potentially booking a demo or having that checkout in the LLM. But if we're relying on a buyer to click a link, which is like the citation, and then go from that citation page to like evaluate further, I feel like that's a really difficult journey to send that buyer on.
Yeah, for sure. I think look, it's way more clear for some models versus others. Some are way more transparent about referrals than others are. I think you can probably guess who is more or less transparent based on just like history. I think the like it's sort of a two birds, one stone problem here where you don't want to send the customer on a wild goose chase throughout your website. One, because it makes attribution harder, but two, because like they're ready to go when they get there, right? They've probably asked 6 questions already. They've they know who your six biggest competitors are for sure because the chatbot probably told them, and they decided to end up on your site to do something with you. And so you need to be ready. You need to make sure that the right pages are getting cited and that those pages are ready to convert. That makes attribution way easier, and it's going to obviously just like skyrocket your conversion rate. But a lot of the models will send a UTM code. It's pretty cut and dry where they came from. And if you can retain the UTM code and like treat it with care into your analytics tool, like complete attribution for some of the models is like absolutely possible today.
Yeah. I also think that, just a hard pill to swallow on the marketing side of things is you just have to, we're kind of like in a post attribution world where if everything's zero click, including things like LinkedIn, like communities that marketers are part of, or not marketers, customers are part of. They're hearing stuff from word of mouth. They're using LLMs to get all this information. Like no one's clicking on links and no one's visiting your website anymore. And so even the attribution that you can measure, where someone's like getting a referral link from an LLM and clicking through. If you think about the typical user experience, like most people don't click on those links and instead they'll Google your brand, they'll go to your website, and that shows up as direct traffic or branded organic traffic. And there's no way to tie everything back perfectly to this perfect attribution dream that we all have had in the past. And so instead, you kind of have to triangulate and look at, okay, we invested on our AI search strategy here. We saw this correlation with that. We saw some referral traffic, but we also saw direct traffic to those pages go up. And we saw conversions go up. And then you kind of have to just, look at the whole picture of things. We're investing here and how that's impacting like the rest of the funnel and where revenue is coming from and all that kind of stuff and triangulate. It's not perfect, but it's just like that's the world we're faced to live in. It's kind of going back to the Mad Men, Madison Avenue style days where you're just doing brand stuff and not knowing what actually works.
I do think we will see companies pop up like when mobile took off, their companies, their whole business, these are hundreds of millions worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Their whole business is like in-app attribution and like multi-channel attribution as you go through the mobile app to the other source. Like I would imagine that will be possible and that someone will figure that out. And that it would be also like, hey, if we used Noble and we got cited in these 10 sources and they actually ended up there and then went to our website, like that should be attributable somehow. And it feels very like mobile appy to me in the sense that you're just making a couple hops, but you have a UTM the whole way. Um, and so I'm curious to see if like, I'm sure someone's working on it. I think it's, will they figure it out? When will they figure it out? I don't know. But it is an interesting problem.
Totally. Last question. I know we're gonna run out of time. I don't know if you guys have seen that Rand Fishkin article where he kind of talks about, the same company is showing up in searches, but the order changes pretty constantly. So it's like if you're searching
Yeah.
for like what's the best X product in the wine industry, like 20-30% of the time it's the same companies listed, but the order changes in the answers. So it's about like I think the takeaway there is like there's no like ranking per se, but it's about being a part of the conversation. Is that what you guys are seeing in the data as well with like the search results that you guys are getting access to?
So like sort of. I mean, I have some issues with like the analysis in general. I mean, like in some ways, like duh. Like there's so many, it's not SERP, right? There aren't just 10 options on the page. Like, of course, there are an unlimited amount of options, and you could have things mentioned multiple times or different amounts of times in different orders. So like that is like what we would expect, is that the ordering is not 100% consistent because it's generative, and it's generative to up to a limit of infinity, basically. The other thing is like that's also sort of true in Google. Like they also have baked in randomization around ranking, and how we feel about it is like a true top to bottom was I 1 through 10 is like not a very useful metric also for SERP. And what you want to actually do is like a pairwise ranking where you're comparing how your brand is looking or when it's mentioned above or below your competitors as an aggregate. And it's basically like it's how March Madness basketball rankings work. It's how chess
Elo, yeah.
rankings work. And so Josh, I think maybe you have an opinion about this, but that's kind of my general feedback on the whole thing.
Yeah, no, I actually duh is actually, I don't know. It wasn't really a find. It was kind of like a gotcha. It was framed as a gotcha, but it's not like for anything to be meaningful, especially when the output is probabilistic, you have to measure it in aggregate. Like the law of large numbers is basically the single governing principle for all of probability, right? Otherwise, nothing matters. And so yeah, of course it's going to be different every time. I mean, it's great that, in this case, I think Rand Fishkin got a bunch of people to try it. So it's good data, but I don't think it's, and I think Rahul, you posted about this, it's not really a gotcha. It's really what people should have expected. And it doesn't, in fact, it lends further credence to tools like Scrunch because you guys are measuring an aggregate. Like that's the results aren't just you go to ping one IP, pull data one time, and you say, oh, this is your share of voice. Like I think that's not how these tools were structured. So I think the study is meaningful, and I think it's good someone did it, but I don't think it proves anybody wrong. So the way it was framed as a gotcha, I think, was just an incorrect read. I don't know that that's how he planned to
I
frame
agree.
it.
I think the results were valid. I just
Yeah.
sort of yeah, disagreed with the general implications, I guess, of what that meant
Yeah.
for AI search. Yeah.
Yeah. In our platform, if you are looking at the daily snapshots that we take of any given prompt, like sometimes you're going to be cited, sometimes you're not. So it varies by model too. So there's like also that factor. So it's very obvious answer. It seems like it's like, yeah, this makes sense. Like this is what I would expect from that study.
Yeah, which is also again true in Google, right? Just
It
to a
is.
lesser degree, obviously, but that's totally true in Google as well. Which like there are many SEO people as well that don't like the 1 to 10 rank for like the reasons we just described and prefer this pairwise ranking method. So I would say to anyone that's looking at this, like look into that. It's pretty effective. It's really understandable because if you watch basketball or play chess, like you can understand how the scoring works. So it's a pretty good way to think about ranking in search, I think.
Awesome. This was great, guys. Thank you for carving out time to do this. I'll send you guys the recording